Niksic. I'm in a Calgary band called Slut Prophet. I'm also a former radio host at CJSW 90.9 FM. Thanks for taking part in Music Calgary's SoundOff Summit Digital Strategies, taking place online from Mohkinstsis in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and all people who make their home in the Treaty 7 region. For future events, make sure to follow Music Calgary on socials and sign up as a member on the website for more programming updates. Today, I am joined with Stacey Kerslake, and we are going to do a Q&A. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stacey.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of this.
Stacey also did a discussion on Monday with Devin from Cadence Music Group and Sarah from ZYK Marketing. If you want to check that out, there will be a link in the chat for that as well. Stacey, why don't we start by just introducing yourself and what you do?
Perfect. So as Audrey mentioned, my name is Stacey Kerslake and I am based in Toronto and I'm a freelance marketing professional, I guess you could say. I have over 10 years of marketing experience in the music industry where I worked at Dynalone Records here in Toronto, Warner Music and Universal Music before making a jump to MRG Live. And then last year I just broke off and did my own thing. So now I run my own freelance marketing shop called Owned Marketing, where I work with a variety of international and Canadian artists. And then I have some non-music clients as well. But it's been really nice to just do my own thing and help Canadian artists really boost their profile and get their music out there.
Amazing. So you seem to be quite the marketing expert. So I did want to start off by just asking if there's any sort of like key terms or buzzwords in the marketing world that maybe some audience members might not be familiar with that you could provide some insight on.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing with marketing that I think a lot of people don't really realize is that it's constantly changing. I mean, even with the introduction of certain social media platforms, it just changes very rapidly overnight, it seems. So, you know, right now, TikTok is obviously the biggest social media platform in terms of music discovery. And a year ago, it wasn't really on people's radar. And I think with everyone being at home, they were looking for something to do. And we've definitely seen that shift. So it's hard to say. I mean, it changes constantly and there's always something new happening and there's changes happening. But I think for anyone who's looking to get into the music industry or marketing in general, it's just always important to remain curious, just read a lot and follow people that you think are like you or people that you strive to be like or what you're looking to get into. And there's always going to be new buzzwords that are coming out and what people are talking about. The conversation is constantly changing. So I think right now, I mean, in the music industry specifically, it's all about content, it's all about music discovery, and a lot of those things go hand in hand with obviously streaming platforms, the social media platforms of TikTok and Instagram and that kind of thing. Influencers is always another buzzword that gets thrown out there quite a bit, and it's a hot topic of discussion for most marketing professionals right now. But I think it's all about just constantly being curious and just reading a lot, researching a lot, and just paying attention as to what's happening out there in social media. I mean, Clubhouse right now is an app that a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards. It's a great platform to have conversations and learn a lot. There's a ton of marketing and also just influential people on there that are sharing their knowledge and new trends. I mean, NFTs right now are a hot topic too. So it's a great resource for anyone that's looking to know like what's up and coming and what's happening out there. But, you know, with digital, all barriers are down, right? There's no provincial or global barriers anymore. It's just everyone is united and we all have access to these platforms, which is really incredible because we can share our knowledge and share our experiences more widely. And so that's what makes it really hard of knowing, you know, what's actually happening out there and like what are the trendy words and things that are happening. So, I mean, we have so much access to all of these things and it can be overwhelming, but if you just start one place, you'll just start to pick up on what's happening out there.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And going off of that a bit, I guess there's quite a few listeners that were kind of curious about how to best navigate the ever-changing landscape of marketing and social media. So we did have a few questions about, kind of the positives and negatives of Facebook ads versus Google ads, as well as using Spotify ads to promote music and bands.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is when you are in a band or you're working with an artist, it can feel overwhelming. You sit down and you're just kind of like, where do I start? But it's really important to know that the same marketing plan doesn't work for every artist. And even though you're seeing some artists do one thing, that doesn't mean that you need to be doing that. It's really important to look at what you're marketing and where their fans are. And we see it all the time with, every artist is different where their fans are. Even in the pop space, there are artists where their fans are predominantly on Spotify or Apple Music. So if they're on Spotify, you're not going to promote on Apple Music. So it's just more about looking more closely at where the fans are and how they're interacting with that artist. And Facebook's an interesting one because it's one of the older kind of social media platforms, and a lot of younger kids are not spending their time there. So again, it's about looking at your audience and whether or not it makes sense to spend money there, or is your money well spent on, TikTok or Instagram, or is it about creating, really great content that makes sense for YouTube? So it's more so about asking your question as to where my audience is or where I think that they are, because it is very difficult when you're starting out and you don't have any fans, or maybe you only have a couple hundred fans. So you might do some A/B testing as to where you're going to spend your money and run some ads to figure out where those people actually are. So it can be difficult, but you just have to ask yourself those key questions of where my fans are, how do they interact, and what they're into. And then from there, you can kind of determine where you want to spend your marketing budget.
Absolutely. And yeah, that was a good point. I was going to mention, if maybe you haven't started out, what the best way to do that. And going on that lines here too, what do you think people who are just starting out should expect to kind of budget aside for a marketing strategy for themselves? Maybe if they are just trying to gain some followers and gain some traction.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's more so about what you're putting out there in terms of content too, because regardless, and I work with a lot of artists where we're not spending any money. It's just a matter that they resonate so well with their fans. So I think it's a lot about authenticity. I think authenticity needs to be at the core of everything that you do. If you're authentic in terms of being yourself and having, your music out there, people will naturally gravitate towards that. But there's also a lot of free tools that are accessible in terms of looking at your audience. Instagram and Facebook have great insights on their platforms to tell you when people are looking and interacting with your content, where they live, what their age is. And you can look at a lot of that data, and you can also understand their behaviors a little bit better as well. And so from there, you can even start out with just a couple $100s to run a small short campaign on Facebook and Instagram. And then from there, when it ends, you can assess it as to what your impressions were, what your reach was, and if it was successful or not, and growing your audience. But you also have to have a really good ad that is attached to it. So, video ads tend to perform a lot better than like a static photo. So that's something to consider. And that also might eat into your budget if maybe you don't have that skill set, or anyone on your team has that skill set to create a video. But you can do a lot with not that much. So it's all about having a really great product at the end of the day, whether that's your video spot and your authenticity in terms of what you're doing and what you're putting out there. And then the rest just kind of falls into place.
And when people are just starting to create their social media posts, I do think we've talked about this last week too, with our other guests, but building up like a brand identity for your band or your artist. Do you have any advice for bands who are trying to maybe come up with that brand, and like what's the best way to navigate that process?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because I think a lot of artists get caught up in having the right brand that they think people want. But I've worked with countless acts where it has felt a little bit manufactured in a sense, and people see right through it. I think, you know, as technology and social media and all of these things become more accessible, people are constantly looking for what's real and what real stories are. So I think, going back to my last point, is you just have to be authentic in everything that you do. And if you are, then that brand just kind of comes more naturally and flows more naturally. And I always tell artists not to look at what other people are doing, just focus on what you want and what you want to do, and the rest will fall into place. But it is definitely important to have those conversations about, you know, do we want specific colors to kind of carry us through each album or each single, or what should our font be, and how does that correlate back to what our socials look like and what our website looks like? Because you do want your fans, when they discover you, to have a very seamless experience wherever they follow you. So if they discover you on Instagram, when they go to your Facebook, you want it to be very similar and very unified in terms of the brand. And then from there, if they go to your YouTube page, they still want to have a very seamless experience. And then most importantly, when they land on your website, it has to look good, it has to be clean, but also match all of your other social platforms in terms of look and feel. And that can be really difficult. But again, if you're always coming back to your authentic self and what you're doing, it should be easier than trying to manufacture some sort of look and feel that you think people want. You should just be doing what you feel is true and what sets you apart.
Can you recommend any maybe resources that are either free or pretty affordable for bands that maybe don't have the graphic design skills or talents behind their belt to be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, Canva is a free design platform. You can design up to, I don't know the exact number, but X amount of different assets, and their resources are really great in terms of, you can start with a blank slate and design it yourself, or you can utilize their templates, and they have a lot of really good music templates on there. Even you could do a marketing flyer to build a website, to build your Instagram and Facebook ads on there. And it's very useful and very easy to use. And that's a great thing about these social media platforms as well, is when you go to market, they all are very, very simple to use, and they give you the proper guidelines and that kind of thing. When it comes to a website, I definitely think that bands should have a website. It used to be the first point of entry for a lot of artists, back before, you know, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. But now it's kind of like a last stop, but it's definitely still something that you need, especially if you're planning to launch a store. When we can get back to live shows, you can put all of your tour dates there. And it's a great way to know who's landing on your website, capture those people, get them on your mailing list. And then, you know, when things start coming, you can retarget those people with that information. And there's a lot of great free web builders out there, where as little as $10 a year, you can get your domain and have it registered. And then for $12, you can get your website launched, essentially. So a website is always something that I recommend artists get done and have it done well. But with a lot of the builders nowadays, you can do it pretty seamlessly and not have to have a ton of experience.
That's great.
And I see that someone said Illustrator or Canva's like Illustrator for people that don't know how to use Illustrator, and that's 100% correct. So it's very, very simple. You don't need to be a Photoshop or Illustrator genius to do Canva. So
I concur as well. I know I use Canva for my own projects as well, and it's very easy to use. So with that in mind as well, are there any particular elements of a social media presence for a band that like draws you in particular to maybe like click on their new album or to check out their video, and maybe examples of some bands that you think are doing a good job of that?
I think a big thing is like consistency, kind of what I was talking about before. Because for me, when I have a lot of artists that come to me looking to utilize my services, and I will get, you know, 5 or 6 links to their Twitter, their Instagram, their YouTube channel. And for me, if it's consistent, I'm already pulled in. But if it's kind of all over the place, that it creates a little bit of confusion. So I think in terms of consistency, having a good bio there at the top, having a website or some sort of link where I can link and discover more, I think that's something that people don't realize is such a useful tool, is that link in bio and how much it can really benefit you. And then just having it look consistent, but having some video and photo content on there. You don't want it to just be all photos. That way, in photos, you don't get a real sense of what the band is or what the artist is about. And so I think it's really important to have some video content thrown in there. But again, you can utilize the different platforms to showcase your different interests and talents too. So, you know, Twitter is more of kind of a top of your head thought process where you can kind of share just random thoughts that you're thinking about, where obviously Instagram is more long form and a little bit more curated. And Facebook tends to be kind of like an information dump or more long form. And then of course, TikTok is, it can be a really creative outlet, and you can do some really great things on there in terms of doing performances, doing acoustic videos, or some sort of video content. And that's a great way to get people in as well. So I think it's all about interacting with your fans, giving them some video content as well as some photo content, and engaging with them. I mean, the comments are there for a reason. And if you have fans that are commenting, you know, saying, I love your work, or I love this song, to reply to them is nothing. And it can really make a huge difference in that fans kind of experience with you. And that also gets them talking about you and your brand and your band, and just getting them to spread the word as well. So I think utilizing those interactive elements on the social platforms can really go a long way. An artist that I think utilizes social media really well is Billie Eilish. I think she is the perfect example of someone who is very authentic, and she does a great job of posting a balance of personal, but also like her project and what she's working on. And she does a really great job of teasing things that are coming next, even to the point where if she dyes her hair and posts a picture about it, everyone's waiting as to like what that could mean. And she just does a really great job of balancing both. And she showcases her quirky personality, which I think is why a lot of people gravitate towards her. And you just get that sense that she's still like a real young girl, but then she's obviously super talented and has a lot going for her too. So she's someone who I think does it really, really well.
Sweet. And then with all of this in mind, it does seem like quite a handful for some people, and they might start to feel overwhelmed. At what point in a band's career do you think they should maybe consider getting a manager or someone to help promote their social media? And also, what does the process look like for finding an artist manager that works for you?
It can definitely be overwhelming. And I think a big part of it is just really looking at your social media and also deciding like what you absolutely don't want to be a part of. I've worked with artists before where they've kind of given me access to all of their social media except maybe one platform. And in my experience, it's usually been TikTok or Instagram, which I totally understand because it's more of a free form, interactive platform. So they want to have that control, where the Twitter, Facebook, the website, all that kind of stuff is passed over to me. So I think it's also about looking at what platforms you want to be on, and you don't have to be on all of them. And that's the other thing to take away. Kind of what I was saying at the beginning is what works for other artists might not work for you. So if you don't like TikTok, you don't have to be on TikTok. And the chances are you're going to sign up for it and never participate on that platform. So you have to really look at what kind of platform you want to engage with and then go from there. And then I've had artists that get a manager right off the bat. Others wait quite a while until they get more of a story built up, and then they get a manager or someone to handle their social media. And for me, it's all about preference. I think you just need to pay attention to how you're feeling and what you have going on. And if you really feel that you need someone to come in and help, then absolutely do that. I'm also a huge proponent of having more of a solidified team around you. I have a lot of people come to me and they're just looking for like streaming support or just social media. But a big part of marketing is having all of it kind of move at one time, because without the digital marketing, there's no streaming. And without the streaming, there's no digital marketing. it all is so intertwined and it works so closely together that you need to have either one person or a team of people that can help move those things along. So I think that's really important. And I think a lot of people dismiss how intertwined the streaming, the touring, and the marketing all really work together. Because if you do it in isolated parts, it's never going to work. You're never going to get your streams grow and your social media grow at the same time. You're going to constantly be stop-starting, and that's not going to help anybody. So I think it's also really important as an artist to come to whoever you're wanting to work with a vision and a plan of your own. The most frustrating thing is having someone come to you and say, I need help with my social media marketing. And then you have a conversation about, okay, here are some areas of improvement. This is what I recommend. And then I always ask, like, what is your vision or what is your goal? And if they don't have one, it's very, very difficult to understand what direction we're going. So you have to really have a plan in your own head, even if it's just a benchmark. You know, I want to get to 10,000 followers by the end of the year, or my goal is to get signed to a label. Okay, what label do you want to get signed to and why? And if it's a major, then this is what we need to do. If it's an indie label you want to get signed to, this is what we need to do. So you should always have your own goals and what you want in front of your head, so that, you know, when you bring in that team, you can have those conversations and reach towards those goals. And that has been, in my experience, the most successful artists that I've worked with, where they might not have a clear timeline, but at least their goal is, you know, I want to be on this stage by February, or I want to get signed here, or I want to work with this person. And then you're always working towards something, which is really, really important.
Awesome. And then I was also wondering here, now that obviously live shows aren't happening for the most part, I have noticed that there's quite a few bands that have started maybe like subscription services through social media, like Twitch and things like that. Do you think that is a good idea for more independent artists that are focusing more on like their local music communities to gain revenue right now? Or do you think there's other ways that bands can gain like a decent amount of revenue without playing live shows right now through their social media presence?
Yeah, it's really, I feel for all artists right now, because the past year and a half has been a huge struggle. I mean, the live part of being an artist is where they get the majority of their income, right? So even if you're playing a local show or a stadium show, it's a huge part of their revenue. So with COVID, it's taken it all away. And so artists have had to be very creative in finding other streams for it. But again, like with social media and all these different platforms, it's really given artists a chance to put their music out there in different ways and be creative and try to find those revenue streams. And I'm a huge proponent of it. So I think if you're starting out, it might be a little bit more difficult to get someone to beyond that paywall of $8 or $10 or whatever it might be, because you're still building your fan base. But that's where you can use your other social media platforms to build towards that. So that's when you can hop onto Instagram and do an IG performance or do something on TikTok. And even if you were to do a performance like every 2 weeks or every week on there, and then you're building up to, you know, hey, we're doing a performance on Twitch on, you know, May 5th, join us then you're building your fan base as you're also promoting a future date. And that could really help boost your revenue in terms of getting 10 people in versus 5. And it's all about thinking ahead. So if you know that you want to do a paywall performance or a subscription performance in a few weeks, then build towards that. Get people into your community ahead of time so that you can get more people down the road. And we've been doing that with one of the artists that I work with, Kate Canning. She's from Abbotsford, BC. And in the beginning, a year ago, she was just going on Instagram and doing covers of different songs. And then she started doing it every 2 weeks. And we noticed that more people were putting in requests, you know, we want to hear this song, and can you cover Shania Twain? And we just kept saying, like, just keep doing it, because that's what the fans want. So let's give them what they want. And now she is doing some performances that have hundreds of people, where a year ago it was only like 70 people. So I think that's also something to always keep in mind, is every additional body that you get in the room or every additional follower that you get is a win. You're not going to just explode overnight. You know, we hear of these overnight sensations like the Billie Eilishes and the Shawn Mendes's, but they worked for a very long time, very hard, and it takes some time. And they've had little wins too. So don't get discouraged if you're going from 5 people into a room to 10. Everyone started there. So you just have to keep pushing.
That kind of leads me to think about the best way to maybe gain followers on social media as well. I know there's kind of like a taboo around hashtags and using hashtags to gain support. On TikTok, it seems a lot more acceptable, I guess, to be using hashtags to kind of gain more attention. Do you have any thoughts on using hashtags in your social media to get more followers?
Yeah, I mean, it's again one of those things that if it works for you, do it. Where if you don't think that it does, then don't. I'm a proponent of it for different reasons. But the way that I kind of look at social media, especially from an artist perspective, is I'll use myself as an example. I'm, you know, just I would like to think that I'm young girl from Toronto, and my music interest is very wide. But I also have other parts of my personality. I like to read, I like to cook. So then if I'm posting something and I'm using a hashtag about cooking, that's going to get more people into my audience. And then my next post, if I'm outside and I'm on a hike and I use hashtag hiking, that's going to get more people into my audience. So I always describe it as nets, like any kind of new aspect that you're showcasing as an artist, a different part of your personality, and then using hashtags that correlate with that, you're essentially just casting a wider net, and you're just constantly bringing new people in, which is what you want. And the great thing too about social media is, you know, if you share something and I see it and I really like what you shared, I'm going to then either share it or even tell a friend about it. And I think we often underestimate the power of even social sharing beyond people on the outer skirts of your audience. And that is really important. And hashtags can really help with that. You know, a lot of people always ask, like, why does this artist have like so many followers? And it's like, well, she posted about her makeup look and used a couple of hashtags that were makeup related. And she got a whole new audience of makeup fanatics into her audience. And then they discovered her music. So even if they're not discovering your music first, that's okay, because you're getting them into your audience at some point. So again, I love hashtags for that reason. It can really help you expand your fan base and your audience. But some people aren't about it, and that's okay too. It just might take a little bit longer.
Great, thank you. And we actually have a live listener question now here as well. They are curious about a minimum budget you would recommend for a full marketing campaign. I also know here that Derry Hers from Indie Week always says to budget 40% of production budget to marketing. Would you agree with that number? Do you think there's a better way to go about it?
Yeah, no, I would agree that 40% makes sense. I think it also depends on what you have going on. Is it an album? Is it a single? And again, where your fans are, because like I said before, no marketing budget is ever the same. I mean, I worked with some of the biggest artists when I was at Universal, but my marketing budgets were different. And also the way that I spent that money was very different. You know, if you look at a catalog artist like a Sam Smith, who tends to skew a little bit older in terms of his fan base, I spent some money on TV ads, where a Billie Eilish, I wasn't necessarily going to spend my money on TV because that's not where her audience was. So I think it's all about looking at where your audience is and where it makes the most sense to spend it, but also what is your product. You're likely not going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single, where you might do that with an album or a tour. But that's the other part too, is when touring comes back and kind of how it was before, is if there was a tour aligned with an album, you were going to spend more money because you were marketing essentially two things at once. So it's hard to say, because it all depends on what you're marketing, but 40% is a pretty good number to start.
And considering that live music isn't happening right now, would you think it would be better to maybe be even more active than you usually are on social media, or still kind of maintain that same amount of presence that's expected of someone? Like what's too much, like what's too over the top for social media presence right now when there's kind of information overload happening due to no live shows?
Yeah, it's funny because some marketing experts will say you need to be posting every day. Some people say 2 to 3 days a week, but that's also where you can go and look at your insights and see what days of the week are more involved in terms of when people are watching you. So for every artist, it's different. Some of my artists, it's like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Other artists, they get a lot of eyes on them on Sunday. And so we plan our content based on that. But I would say that artists have increased their social media presence because of that lack of live access. But I think it's also brought a lot of opportunity for that as well. I mean, artists are being really creative with what they're doing. And I think for any artist starting out, the pandemic has kind of been a blessing in that way, because they might not have been able to get a live show this early on in their career, but they essentially have this time at home where they could be performing, doing some Instagram lives, doing some TikToks, collaborating with other artists who are also, at home, and then putting something up online. And that way they can build their followers so that when that turn comes around where they could get on a tour or get a live show, they have more fans. Then they also have a story that they can tell to get that gig. So I think a lot of artists could be looking at this time at home as a blessing in a way, where they can be putting out more content and growing their audience. And I think a lot of artists too are a little bit afraid to take chances in messaging other artists and inviting them to collaborate, or there's all these great tools out there where you can just message an artist and say, hey, like, I really like this song, or I covered you on my TikTok. And that's a great way to get eyes on you as well.
Great, thanks. And we also have another live listener question here, kind of a two-parter. So we'll start with the one for now. They're just asking, to what extent are sponsored ads on Facebook or Instagram worth it for an artist to take part in?
Again, I think it depends on what you're marketing at that point. I'm more of a proponent of doing Facebook ads versus a boosted post. I think that they're just more, they're a better kind of bang for your buck, if you will, and they go a little bit further, and you get more eyes on it. So I'm more of a proponent for that. But again, it depends on what you're marketing and what your budget is. And I think it's really important, and artists don't do this enough, is doing that A/B testing in the early days. I mean, I still will, when I get a brand new artist, I will run 2 sets of ads just to see which one performs better, because that's really important. You need to understand how the audience is going to interact and engage with that ad before you run your second phase, because if you don't, then it could essentially be a waste of money. But also remind yourself that it's okay to fail. I mean, I failed a bunch in my career, but I wouldn't have gotten to where I am without those failings. And when you're an artist and you're working with artists, like, you're constantly learning new things because of those little failures. So again, there's no right way to do it. If you're a fan of those boosted posts, absolutely do it. But try it and see, because that's also the only reason why how you're going to come to that conclusion that it works for you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of answers the second part to this listener's question, but we'll ask it anyways as well. They're also wondering if it would be worth it to run sponsored ads in addition or in combination with a paid campaign through a PR firm, or would it be best to just stick with the kind of PR firm and organically build things through that stream?
That's a good question, because similar to what I was saying before, I think a lot of artists think that you have to run everything kind of insulated, and we run PR this week and we do radio this week and we do ads this week. I am not a fan of that. Some people might be, and that's totally fine. I'm a huge proponent of that. All things kind of have to be lit at once in order to run efficiently. And so that's where, like I was saying before, when an artist comes to me and they say, I have a new single, I need to grow my social presence, but I also have a publicist and I have someone that works on radio, that's when I'm like, okay, great, let's get everybody together and let's make a plan. Because without the social media, the radio's not going to work. Without the radio, the streaming's not going to work. Without the streaming, the radio's not going to work. It's all so interconnected that it's really important that I always kind of say that all cylinders are firing at once, because you want that machine to just continue rolling forward. Because when you have it run at separate times, it is this weird stop start, and it doesn't feel like a project. It feels very insulated and not well planned. So I think it's really important to have everybody engaged.
Great, thank you. And also, we just launched a poll here for the audience to kind of gauge a sense of where you use ads to promote your music as well. So feel free to vote on that so we can get a better sense of what people in this Q&A feels best. I was also wondering, in terms of marketing right now as well, and social media presence, if you had any advice for maybe other people within the music industry that aren't necessarily performers, and what they could be doing right now to maintain a presence and kind of maintain that sense of music community. I was thinking mostly in particular to, let's say, like live music venues who maybe can't have shows right now, or sound engineers, or anyone kind of working in the back end to also maintain a presence and build a following.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in the music industry that I've learned is the more that you know, the further you will get. And I think that's how I ended up where I am, because when I was working in the major label system, I was in a marketing role, obviously, and I had to rely on other people. So when I was there, when I wanted to run Facebook ads, I would tell someone, the ad buyer, that I want to run Facebook ads. When I wanted a press release, I would go to the communications person and say, I need a press release. But then when I stepped away from that world, I had to learn that skill set all on my own. And I think that really has made me a more well-rounded marketing person, which has in turn increased my presence. Without that, I wouldn't be talking to you and being a part of the SoundOff series. So I think it's very easy to be, in your role and then not, look beyond that. But I think regardless of what role you are in the music industry, it's so important to always be sharpening your skill set, which will increase your presence. And right now is a great time. When the pandemic hit last year, I kind of went into learning mode, and I was like, okay, I want to learn how to build a website. I want to learn to do this. I want to learn to do this. And with the internet, there's so many free resources out there that teach you these things. You can learn to book and schedule Facebook ads very easily. You can learn Instagram insights and YouTube insights and Google ads and all these different things very easily just by reading their how-tos or their FAQs, and also just Googling it and finding articles. And so I think that's a really big thing that anyone working in the music industry should be doing, because it's constantly changing. And, when I talk to my other friends who are urban planners or teachers, they're always like, you're always learning something, or you're always doing something new. And I'm like, well, I have to. That's just how the music industry is. It's always changing. So I think that's something that you should be prepared for. And that's also goes back to your social media channels. When you learn something new or discover something new, post about it, share your thoughts, share your insights. And I think this last year has also changed. We haven't talked about LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is such a valuable platform, especially for people in the music industry right now. It's been a place where a lot of industries that have been affected by COVID, those people have gone and shared their stories, and it's becoming more of a personal platform. And I think it's a great opportunity for anyone working in the music industry right now to share what their experience has been, what they're looking forward to. I think along with sports, live music is the one thing that people are wanting to come back more than ever. So you have an interest in music. So share, what artists you want to see first or most, or do you want to go and see an iconic venue in another city or another country? And just think about those things of like what you miss about music the most and post about it. It can be as simple as that.
Great. I think that is excellent advice. And I did want to, you just mentioned briefly about switching from working with like big name music groups and now doing your own thing as well. I wanted to kind of grasp what an average work day for you looks like now that you are on your own with your own company.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and I just posted about it on LinkedIn yesterday about how being an entrepreneur has completely changed my mindset, and the fact that I wake up feeling more prepared for my day because I have it pretty structured, and I know what's happening. Where when I was working in the music industry more, in it, I never knew what was going to happen. There was always a fire. There was always something. And it was exciting, but it was also really stressful. And so now I wake up and I know what my day is going to be like. I don't have coworkers, so I have to figure out a lot of stuff on my own, which makes me tired at the end of the day, but I'm also sleeping better, I've noticed. And I also have a new kind of resource in terms of other entrepreneurs. And I talk a lot to friends that are entrepreneurs, even in like the health industry. And how do you grasp this? Or like, how are you doing your taxes? Like I did my taxes for the first time on my own this year, but I learned something, and that's just kind of the way that I look at it. But I also have noticed that I don't have a lot of red tape. Like I don't have to ask for permission because I am my own boss. So when I do have an artist that wants to work with me, I don't have to get my marketing plan approved by anybody else. I can just go to them and say, this is my recommendation based on my 10 years of experience working in the music industry, and this is what I think we should do. And then it's more of a discussion, and I really like that. And it's more personable. And I feel like I have that human connection, which I think I was missing when I was working in the label system, just in terms of when I was there, I was running a mile a minute. So it was really hard to kind of come back to the ground and be like, okay, this is what I'm doing. So even with, Kate, and I mentioned her before, I've only been working with her for a year and a half, and she's grown so much. And those little wins mean so much to us that, we have a Zoom call and we do a little happy dance for reaching 1 million streams, where I never did that when I was working in the majors. So, I feel more humbled about doing my own thing, but also I'm more confident than I ever was, I think, just because I have to rely on myself. I can't rely on anybody else. So, and I think a lot of people take the music industry for granted in that way, is that there is room for people to do their own thing and to have their own hustle. You don't have to fit into a box. And there's a place for everybody. I have zero musical talent, but I always wanted to work in music. And it took me a long time to realize that there is a place for me at a table somewhere, and you just have to find it. And if you're persistent and you're dedicated, like, you will make it work, whether you're an artist or a sound person, or you want to be a venue manager or work in production, you'll make it work. You just have to, be dedicated to it. And my biggest thing too is just be nice. Like, the amount of times that I've had to call favors over the years to past bosses or to past coworkers to get into a show or to get onto a collaboration or whatever it might be, especially now, like I've definitely noticed that my goodness to other people has helped me so much. And that is the biggest thing that I can tell anyone working in the music industry, is just to be nice, and it will get you a lot further than, being mean to someone. So yeah, it can go a long way.
Great. I do have another live listener question, switching gears a little bit to kind of thinking ahead and moving forward. They're wondering if there's any emerging artists who are currently planning tours and marketing campaigns for later in the year. And is there a general level of optimism for you in particular about planning tours in the future? And what, if any, contingency plans are some artists running in case those don't work out?
Yeah, it's funny because I think different artists are operating on different levels of comfort when it comes to the pandemic and getting back out on the road. I know for me, the artists that I work with, we're not talking about it for any earlier than fall 2021, where I know some artists in the US have full-blown tours scheduled to start in as early as August. It's a lot of unknown right now with the pandemic and what's going to happen, but I'm very confident that we're going to experience some sort of rejuvenation when all of this is done. Osheaga just announced earlier this week that they won't be coming back next year and that they'll be coming back in 2022, which I know is really disheartening. It's an incredible festival, and it's been 2 years since we've seen that festival. Festivals are also very, very expensive to run. And so for them, it's obviously so disheartening to not be able to come back. But I do think that once people start feeling more comfortable and we get to a place where it's safe for everyone, I think people are just going to flood and back to live music. I know I was telling a friend the other day, if you're from Toronto, you know that at the Horseshoe Tavern, there's one place where you can feel the AC in the room, and it's about a very small square footage where you can actually get air when it's super hot in there. And I just said, like, oh, I'm craving just to go back to the Sweaty Horseshoe and just find that little spot and stand there, because you miss the little things about going to live shows. And when you work in the music industry, it's just so nice to run into an old boss or an old coworker or an old band that you had worked with. And I'm definitely looking forward to that, but also just discovering new music, going early and checking out the opener and going to merch tables, like all those little things I miss so much. But I am very confident that it's going to come back and it's going to be really strong. So.
Great. And on that kind of line, do you have any artists that you're really listening to right now that you want to give a little shout out to?
What am I listening to right now? I will admit that I've been streaming the Taylor Swift album for the past year. I just think that she utilized the quarantine so perfectly by putting out like a true piece of art, and like really dug deep and worked with incredible collaborators on that record. What am I listening to? I'm also really trying to be healthy and like maintain my health. I'm just looking at my Spotify right now. So a lot of my songs are very upbeat, like house music, which I'm not typically into. Like I'm going back to like Iconopop in the early days and that kind of thing. Ryan Shepherd is someone that I've been listening to quite a bit. And who is this other one? Holly Humberstone too. I'm like obsessed with her right now. And I think she's going to do really, really big things. So I highly recommend listening to her. But yeah, it changes every day. Like I'm one of those people where I like Spotify to tell me what I should be listening to. So I just put in my daily mix, and then anything that stands out to me, I'll add to my own playlist. But I also spend a lot of time listening to the music of the artists that I'm working with. So I'm working with a girl out of the US called Bailey Bryan, and she's putting out an EP on May 7th. So I've just been listening to that record over and over again because we're ramping up all the marketing in a couple weeks. So I tend to listen and maybe over listen to the artists that I'm working with, like going into a campaign. I think it's just really important. But yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing those names there. We have just about 10 minutes left, so if anyone else wants to ask any questions, please feel free to do so in the Q&A box or the chat box. Otherwise, we'll keep moving here. I have a couple other questions to kind of squeeze in last minute. Hopefully they're not too big of like a can of worms or anything, but they are just some listener questions that were asked since your discussion on Monday. We have someone that is curious about geo-blocking, if you are familiar with that term and like what that entails and the kind of consequences of geo-blocking for users and their social media access.
Yeah, so you might come across this sometimes when you go to watch a video and it says, this is not open to watch or to view in your country. And that happens sometimes. I think it's gotten a lot better over the years as people have, been sharing more information across different channels, but ultimately it comes down to copyright. Copyright is something that I'm not an expert in, so I won't go too deep into it, but it can be a little bit frustrating when you're trying to get your music out there and you get geo-blocked from sharing it in other countries. But that's where you just have to keep being active and putting your music out there. Getting your music onto streaming, onto DSPs is quite easy. So it's something that I encourage a lot of artists to do. It can be really frustrating, but yeah, it's not something that I'm entirely familiar with in terms of like the legalities around it. But because when I was at the major labels too, if that happened, again, I would send it off to another team and they would take care of it for me. But yeah, again, just you can Google it, research it, understand the rules and understand why that's happening. And there's most usually a solution for it.
Speaking of getting your music onto streaming services as well, I know there's quite a few different distributors, like CD Baby or DistroKid. Do you think there's one that kind of is better than the other, or any advice for people who are trying to like compare distributors?
I think, again, it comes down to preference. I mean, I always have this conversation about labels. Right now, we're talking to an artist about getting signed out of the US, and she's been she's been asking a lot of questions about what label is the best, and we've given our recommendations. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what you feel comfortable with. So I think that's really important. And again, a lot of those distros, they clearly outline what they offer and what they can do for you. So I think it's just a matter of researching it and finding which one makes the most sense for you. And I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway with anything in the music industry, is that just do what makes sense for you. Don't be looking to what other people are doing and say like, oh, this person went with CD Baby, so I'm going to do that. You just have to do with what works for you.
And we have one final listener question here before we can start to wrap things up a little bit. But they're just wondering about ways to get a positive return of investment in gaining Spotify followers, or I guess the best way to gain Spotify followers in particular, if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I think a lot of people assume that your Spotify followers have to do with your number of streams, but there's so many different tactics that you can use to build your following there. One of the biggest is to create your own playlist. This is something that we do with our artists, where they create one playlist where it can be something as simple as like what I'm listening to, or inspiration. It should just be something that you can change frequently, like every 1 or 2 weeks, where you don't have to change kind of the theme of it. Because when you create multiple playlists, you're splitting your audience. So you can create one playlist, share it out on your social platforms, and just say something, this is what I'm listening to, or these are the songs that inspired me to write my album or my new single. And a lot of artists do this, and they share it out. And then that way people also follow back. And I always recommend putting your own song in the top bracket of that playlist, so that your song is played first. And that's one way to get followers. You can also run contests, and we've done this before too, where you're giving away some sort of experience, win a Zoom call with me to enter, follow me on Spotify, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And that's a great way to do it. And also you can go in and look at your similar artists that are similar to you. And then you can also go to those artists' social channels and engage with their fans there and encourage them to follow you and interact with you. But the Spotify followers do come. It takes a long time to build, but you can do it. It's really important just to be active on the platform, and updating your playlist is a great way to do that, and sharing that out. And just having people follow you prior to you dropping a single or an album, a few weeks out, just say, follow us on Spotify, so that when our album drops, or when our single drops. I don't think artists do that enough, of letting people know that music is coming and here's what you need to do to be prepared for when that music comes. I think a lot of people just have their music come out on Friday and just assume that their followers will grow, but you do have to be active in pointing people to that platform and getting them to follow you there. And it's also too about making sure that your profile is updated. One of my biggest pet peeves is going to a Spotify artist profile and it being empty, or there's an outdated bio or an outdated photo. So definitely keep those things updated. That's really important. Make sure it's on your website. Make sure that it's in your profiles on social so that people can find you. That's also really important. So yeah, those are my little bits of advice for that.
That's great. I've never, really considered treating your Spotify page like another social media account, and I think it would make a huge difference to do that. So that's great advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and YouTube is, we haven't talked much about YouTube on this conversation, but that's another one where if you're about to drop a music video, share your YouTube channel link and get people to subscribe to your channel ahead of the release so that they get that alert and they know that it's coming. And there's even artists that I subscribe to and I get that alert when the music video comes out and I instantly watch it. So I think it's really important to be active there and treat it as you do your other social media platforms. It can be really easy to kind of favor one social media platform over the other. And that typically bleeds back to whether you're a fan of it or not. And that's a perfect example of a platform where if you're not into maintaining your Spotify profile or your YouTube profile, you can hand that off to a social media manager or someone to help you. You don't have to do it all. Just you can stick to the ones that you like, but then have someone else maintain the ones that maybe aren't a priority for you, but are a priority for your project.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today as well. I really do appreciate it. I wanted to give one last couple minutes here for you to just let the listeners know where they can maybe follow up with what you're doing, learn more about you as a person, and
Sure. So I am Stacey Kerslake on all of my personal social media, and I am on LinkedIn, and I'm a huge proponent of LinkedIn. I share a lot of kind of what I'm doing, and my learnings are there. So if you are curious about getting into the music industry, I'm happy to connect with you. I do a lot of conversations with other young artists and industry professionals that are looking to grow. So absolutely, you can hit me up there. And then I have Owned Marketing, which is my own freelance business, and it's owned marketing across all of the social media channels as well. I try to keep it clean and consistent. It's easy to find me. And I'm happy to connect with anyone that has more questions or looking to learn more. So yeah.
Great. Thanks again for taking the time today. And for anyone watching as well, you can always go back and listen to this Q&A again on YouTube later on Music Calgary's YouTube channel. And you can also go back and listen to Stacey's digital marketing panel discussion with Devin McCurry of Cadence Music Group and Sarah Franzek from ZYK Marketing as well on the YouTube channel. Is there anything else you would like to kind of give a shout out to or mention in the last couple minutes here of the Q&A?
No, I think I've really enjoyed being a part of this summit. I think it's really important that, we're having these conversations and letting, industry people know that we're here, who we are, what we do, and sharing our advice. It's something that I wish I had when I was coming up through the industry. So it's such a great resource, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. And thank you so much. And just stay authentic. Everyone just needs to stay authentic and stay safe and stay healthy. And I can't wait to be in Calgary and hang out at the back of the venue and see you and give you a high five. And I can't wait for that day. It's going to be great. So
great. Well, thank you so much, Stacey. Have a good rest of your, Saturday.
Thanks so much.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you again next Saturday for another Q&A. Bye.